My own family sacrificed me. Not because they hated me. Not because I had done something unforgivable. They sacrificed me because, in the end, I was the cheapest price they could pay for power. My name is Noah, by the way. I probably should have led with that, but some things matter more than introductions when you're about to die. The last thing I remember was my younger brother gripping the knife with trembling hands. He couldn't even look me in the eyes. My mother was crying. Not because I was about to die, because she was afraid the ritual wouldn't work. My father stood behind them with the same expression he always wore whenever he made a difficult decision. Calm. Cold. Certain. As if my death was just another investment. And my fiancée. She never said a single word. She simply stood beside my brother, wearing the engagement ring I had spent 2 years saving to buy. That hurt far more than the knife. If you had asked me 3 years earlier whether those 5 people would ever betray me, I would have laughed. Everything I did was for them. I worked overtime so my parents wouldn't lose the house. I paid my brother's university tuition after Dad's business failed. I postponed my own dreams because there was always another family emergency. When my girlfriend wanted a better apartment, I worked weekends. When my father needed money, I gave it. When my mother wanted something, I bought it. When my brother got into trouble, I fixed it. I thought that was what family meant. Turns out, I was just making myself more useful. And useful people are the easiest to sacrifice. The knife entered my chest. Everything went black. I woke up gasping for air. My alarm was ringing. Sunlight poured through the window. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. I grabbed my chest. No wound. No blood. No pain. Only the memory. No. I jumped out of bed and looked around the tiny apartment I'd left years ago. The cracked ceiling. The cheap desk. The secondhand laptop. The coffee mug with a broken handle. I hadn't seen this place in years. Slowly. I looked toward the calendar hanging beside the kitchen. June 17, 2 years before the apocalypse. I stared at that date for almost an entire minute. No! I whispered again. This is impossible. I rushed to my computer. Internet. News. Stock market. Everything matched. Every single detail. I remembered 4 events that changed human history forever. The first would happen in 11 days. The second, 3 months later. The third, 1 year after that. And the fourth, the Great Blackout, the day civilization collapsed. In my first life, I ignored every warning, just like everyone else. Not this time. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cry. I didn't wonder why I had returned. I opened my laptop. Logged into every bank account I owned, sold every investment, applied for every loan the banks were willing to approve, called my boss. I quit. Then I opened a blank document. I had already lived through the apocalypse once. It's time. I was going to arrive 2 years early. At the top of the page, I typed a single sentence. 730 days. Under it, I began writing my plan. Recover every dollar I can. Buy the warehouse. Acquire the abandoned quarry. Invest in AI before the boom. Purchase semiconductor stocks before the market explodes. Never tell anyone. Avoid Elena. Never trust my brother. Never save my father from bankruptcy. Never lend my mother another dollar. And above all, secure the first relic before anyone even knows relics exist. Because while the rest of the world was busy planning vacations, I was preparing for the end of civilization. I spent the next 6 hours moving faster than I ever had in my entire life. Every minute mattered. Not because the apocalypse was tomorrow, because the opportunity to prepare would disappear long before it arrived. The banks had no idea they were about to lend millions to someone who would never pay them back. Not because I planned to run away. Because 2 years from now, money wouldn't mean anything. The first thing I bought wasn't food. It wasn't weapons. It wasn't even land. It was information. I purchased every AI course I could find, every programming library, every dataset, every GPU I could get my hands on before prices exploded. People would later say the AI revolution happened overnight. They were wrong. I remembered exactly which companies were about to dominate the market, which startups would become billion-dollar giants, which CEOs everyone laughed at, until they became legends. By the end of that week, 90% of everything I owned had already been invested. If anyone looked at my portfolio, they would have thought I was insane. I smiled. That's exactly what they thought the first time, too. My phone vibrated. Dad. I stared at the screen. In my previous life. I answered immediately. This time. I let it ring. A minute later. Another call. Mom. Ignored. Then my brother. Ignored. Finally. Elena. My fiancée. I almost laughed. Back then. Whenever she called, I'd stop whatever I was doing. Now, I couldn't even remember why I had loved her. She called 6 times. Then she sent a message. Where are you? Your family is waiting. I deleted it without replying. 3 seconds later, another message. Don't embarrass your parents again. There it was. The first crack. Back then, I would have apologized. Now, I simply muted the conversation. I had far more important things to do. That afternoon, I drove 3 hours to a forgotten industrial district. Most people avoided the place. Half the warehouses were abandoned. The roads were broken. The entire area looked like it would collapse any day. Perfect! I parked the car, walked through waist-high weeds, and stopped in front of Warehouse 17. Dust, rust, broken windows. To everyone else, it was worthless. To me, it was priceless. Exactly 1 year and 8 months from today, the first dimensional crack would open right above this building. Thousands of people would die fighting over what emerged. I wasn't going to be one of them. I was going to own the building before anyone even knew it mattered. The real estate agent arrived 20 minutes later. He looked confused. You seriously want this one? Yes. He scratched his head. You know, there are newer warehouses nearby. I know. This one's basically falling apart. I know. You don't even want to look inside? I'll take it. He blinked. I haven't even told you the price. I'll pay cash. His entire attitude changed. Within 45 minutes, Warehouse 17 belonged to me. As I signed the documents, I couldn't stop smiling. The first piece had fallen exactly where I wanted it. One move. 729 days left. Now, when I got home that night, all the lights were on. Every car was parked outside. Great. The family meeting. I had completely forgotten. Dad opened the door before I even reached it. There you are. His voice wasn't worried. It was annoyed. Do you have any idea how long we've been waiting? I looked at him. For just a second. I remembered carrying him through the ruins after the second calamity because he'd broken his leg. I remembered starving so he could eat. I remembered nearly dying to protect him. He remembered none of that. Not anymore. I'm busy. The words came out colder than I expected. The entire living room went silent. Mom frowned. What kind of answer is that? My brother laughed. Don't mind him. He probably got fired. Everyone chuckled. Even Elena smiled. In my first life. That joke would have bothered me. This time, it almost made me feel sorry for them. Because while they were laughing, every minute they wasted, I was getting further ahead. None of them realized it yet. But our lives had already split into 2 completely different futures. And only one of us knew where they led. That night, I barely slept. Because I was nervous. Because the clock had started. 729 days. 729 opportunities to become untouchable. 11 days later, the world changed. Not because monsters appeared. Not because the sky split open. Because of a single video. Someone uploaded a 17-second clip showing strange blue lights floating above the Arctic Ocean. The internet exploded. Most people called it fate. Others said it was military technology. Conspiracy channels gained millions of followers overnight. Scientists laughed. Governments denied everything. Exactly like I remembered. I watched the video once, closed my laptop, and smiled. The first Helios file would be released in less than 12 hours. Nobody knew what a Helios file was yet. Tomorrow, the entire planet would. At exactly 9:14 a.m., every phone, every TV, every billboard with a digital display, every computer connected to the internet turned black. For 13 seconds, the entire world froze. Then white letters appeared. Helios Feel 001. People panicked. Some thought hackers had taken over. Others believed World War III had started. I didn't even bother reading it again. I already knew every word. Human civilization had received its first warning. Most people focused on the terrifying parts. The strange symbols. The impossible equations. The countdown shown at the bottom. I ignored all of it. Instead, I searched for 3 words buried on page 38. 3 words almost nobody noticed. Rare earth elements. That single paragraph changed my entire financial plan. Within 2 hours, I sold half my AI portfolio, bought mining companies. Lithium, copper, rare earth refining. 3 CEOs would later become some of the richest people on Earth. Today, nobody even knew their names. The media spent weeks debating whether the Helios file was real. I spent those weeks becoming rich. One prediction after another. Every single one came true. The AI market exploded exactly when I remembered. Chip manufacturers couldn't keep up with demand. Energy companies followed. Cloud infrastructure. Quantum computing. Military contractors. Money stopped being a problem. Then, I started building. Not one warehouse. 7. Different cities. Different countries. Each one stocked with food, medicine, solar panels, generators, fuel, water purification systems, seeds, medical equipment, satellite communication devices, weapons, vehicles, everything. No luxury, only survival. Every warehouse was owned by a different shell company. Every payment went through different accounts. If anyone investigated me, they'd find nothing unusual. Just another guy making surprisingly good investments. Exactly how I wanted it. 3 months later, Dad knocked on my apartment door. I already knew why he was there. He looked exhausted. The business isn't doing well. Of course it wasn't. I remembered the recession that would wipe out hundreds of small companies. Last time, I emptied my savings to help him. This time, I listened in silence. We just need a little help. A little. That little help had cost me everything in my first life. I can't. His face hardened. What do you mean you can't? I don't have the money. It wasn't technically a lie. Every dollar I owned had already become something far more valuable than cash. He sighed dramatically. I guess family doesn't mean much anymore. I almost laughed. Family. That word sounded different now. He left without saying goodbye. 2 hours later, Mom called. Then my brother. Then Elena. Apparently I was selfish now. Apparently I had changed. Apparently success had made me arrogant. If only they knew. I hadn't changed. I'd simply stopped sacrificing myself for people who would never do the same for me. Months passed. The world slowly forgot about Helios File 001. People went back to work, back to school, back to arguing on social media, back to pretending nothing was happening. I kept preparing. Every morning began the same way. Markets, construction reports, supply chains, satellite images, government contracts, then training. Every single day. Running, strength, endurance, firearms, first aid, navigation, survival. By the end of the first year, I wasn't the same man who had died on that altar. Not even close. But none of that, none of the money, none of the warehouses, none of the preparation would matter, because I was now approaching the event that truly terrified me. The second Helios file, the one that proved humanity had already waited too long. The second Helios file wasn't supposed to arrive for another 8 months. I knew the exact date, the exact hour, even the first sentence. What I didn't know was that someone else had started changing the timeline. Vokal, correction, so. It happened on a Tuesday. I was reviewing security footage from one of my warehouses when my phone buzzed. A news alert. Undue investment. Firm acquires Blackstone Quarry for record price. I froze. Blackstone Quarry. No, that wasn't possible. I grabbed my laptop and opened the article. The buyer wasn't listed. The ownership records had already been sealed. I immediately opened my notebook. Every major event from my previous life was written inside. Every acquisition, every Helios file, every dimensional crack, every relic, every disaster. Blackstone Quarry shouldn't be sold for another 14 months. Someone had bought it today. My heartbeat sped up. For the first time since returning, something had happened that I didn't remember. Someone had moved before me. Sure, Masho boy. Amayo, ama. No, I whispered. There has to be another regressor. I hated that thought. If someone else remembered the future, then every advantage I had could disappear overnight. For the next 3 days, I abandoned every other project. I traced shell companies, financial reports, property transfers, private contractors. Nothing! Whoever bought the quarry had erased every trace. Professional. Far too professional. My phone rang. Elena. Again. Ignored. 5 seconds later, my brother. Ignored. Dad. Ignored. Mom. Ignored. Then, my aunt. That was new. I answered, "Hello? Your father's company is finished." I closed my eyes. Right on schedule. Except this time, I wasn't the one who was going to save him. That evening, everyone gathered at my parents' house. Again, they all looked at me the same way they used to. Like I was the family's emergency fund. Dad cleared his throat. "You've been investing lately." "Interesting." Someone had noticed. "I've been working." He nodded. "We need your help." There it was. In my previous life, this conversation ended with me signing away almost every dollar I owned. That money would have become nearly 200 million before the apocalypse. Instead, I gave it to them to save a company that failed anyway. This time, I smiled. "I'm sorry. I can't." The room fell silent. Mom slammed her hand on the table. "After everything we've done for you?" I almost laughed. Everything? I remembered paying their mortgage, their medical bills, my brother's tuition. Even this house had been saved because of me. Yet somehow, they genuinely believed they had sacrificed everything for me. Memory is funny. People always remember the version that makes them the hero. My brother leaned back in his chair. "You think you're better than us now?" "No, I just don't think like you anymore. What the hell is that supposed to mean? It means. I stood up. I'm done setting myself on fire to keep everyone else warm. Nobody said a word. Even Elena looked surprised. In my first life, I would have apologized. Now, I simply walked out. Shosho. So mom. Oh mom. Miss. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. 4 disappointed faces. 1 angry face. They still believed I'd eventually come back. That guilt would win. That I'd cave in. I wouldn't. Not this time. But because, while they were arguing over a dying company, I had something far more important to do. Tomorrow morning, at exactly 8:32, a meteor no larger than a basketball would crash into an abandoned forest less than 40 miles from the city. Nobody would report it. Nobody would investigate it. Nobody would even know it happened. But I did. Because buried inside that crater was the first object that had ever changed my fate. And unlike my first life, this time, I intended to reach it before anyone else. I left before sunrise. No traffic. No reporters. No military checkpoints. Just an empty highway and a destination only I knew existed. 40 minutes later, I parked beside an abandoned service road. According to every map, there was nothing here. Perfect. I grabbed my backpack, a metal detector, a shovel, and started walking into the forest. Every step matched a memory. Not because I had been here before, because I had died wishing I had. In my first life, the man who found this place became one of the strongest survivors on the continent. Not the strongest fighter, not even close, but the one who never went hungry, never ran out of medicine, never had to beg. That kind of strength doesn't show up in a fight. It shows up in who's still standing after everyone else has run out of options. Everyone thought it was because he was talented. They were wrong. He was simply the first one to arrive. Today, that man was still asleep in his apartment. After another 20 minutes, I stopped. The clearing looked exactly the way I remembered. Silent, ordinary, almost disappointing. Then I heard it. A whistle, barely audible. I looked up. A streak of silver crossed the morning sky. 3 seconds. 2. 1. The impact shook the ground beneath my feet. Birds exploded out of the trees. Dust filled the air. By the time the smoke cleared, a crater the size of a swimming pool had appeared in front of me. I didn't hesitate. I jumped inside. There it was, half buried beneath black rock. A sphere, about the size of a baseball. Its surface looked like liquid metal frozen in place. Tiny golden symbols slowly moved across it like living veins. Exactly. As I remembered, I reached toward it, then stopped. In my first life, the man who found it grabbed it immediately. He lost his right arm before the contract even began. Knowledge. That was my real advantage. I opened my backpack, pulled out a pair of insulated gloves, a ceramic container, and a small silver blade. Only then did I touch the sphere. It vibrated violently. The symbols accelerated. A voice echoed directly inside my mind.
Compatibility detected.
I smiled. Yeah, I know. The sphere floated out of my hands. The forest became completely silent. Even the wind disappeared. One sentence appeared before my eyes.
Offer a drop of blood to begin synchronization.
I carefully cut my finger. 1 drop. No more. The blood disappeared before it even touched the surface. The sphere cracked. Not like stone. Like an egg. Light burst from inside. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, someone was standing in front of me. He looked human. Almost. Tall. Black hair. golden eyes. Wearing an old military coat that seemed woven from shadows. He looked at me for several seconds. Then he smiled. I've been waiting a very long time. I frowned. What? He tilted his head. You're early. That sentence made my blood run cold. Early? No, that wasn't right. In my previous life, nobody had ever mentioned being early. The man extended his hand. My name is Kale. I am your first guardian. From this moment forward, our lives are linked. I stared at him. You know who I am? He laughed quietly. No, but I know something even more interesting. What? He looked directly into my eyes. You're not the first person to return. For a moment, the entire world disappeared. Every calculation, every investment, every warehouse, every prediction, every plan. None of it mattered anymore, because there was only one thought inside my head. If someone else had returned before me, then maybe, just maybe, my family hadn't been acting alone in my first life. For several seconds. Neither of us spoke. The only sound came from the crackling remains of the crater behind us. I was the first to break the silence. How many? Kale looked confused. How many what? How many people came back? He smiled. Wrong question. I asked first. He slowly walked around me, studying me as if I were some kind of experiment. The question you should be asking is, how many people remember? A chill ran down my spine. Remember, wasn't that the same thing? Before I could ask another question, Kale raised one finger. You have exactly 3 questions. Choose them carefully. I took a deep breath. There were hundreds of things I wanted to know. Who created the Helios files? Who caused the apocalypse? Why had I returned? Instead, I asked the question that mattered most. Can I change the future? Kale didn't answer immediately. He looked toward the sky. The future is already changing. What do you mean? The quarry. My eyes widened. You know about Blackstone? I know someone reached it before you. So there is another regressor. Kale slowly shook his head. I didn't say that. Then who? I cannot answer. That wasn't one of my questions anymore. Damn. My second question. What happens if I fail? His smile disappeared. You already know. I did. Death. No. Something much worse. Watching everyone die again. My last question. I looked directly into his eyes. Why me? For the first time. Kale looked almost disappointed. I was hoping you'd ask something more useful. So? He sighed. Because you were never supposed to survive your first life. Silence. My heart skipped a beat. What? You died. I know I died. No. He interrupted me. I mean, you died years before your family sacrificed you. I froze. That made no sense. What are you talking about? The life you remember. Isn't the original timeline? Every hair on my body stood up. If that was true, then whose memories did I have? Kale turned around. We're done. Wait! You've already spent your questions. I need answers. So do I. He looked over his shoulder. And that's why this is going to be interesting. His body dissolved into thousands of tiny golden particles. Before disappearing completely, he left me with one final sentence. Become stronger. Because the people hunting you already know you've returned. The forest became silent again. No music. No lights. No magical explosion. Only me, standing alone, holding the broken shell of the sphere. I looked down. A black mark had appeared on the back of my right hand. It resembled a compass, except every direction pointed inward. The moment I touched it, a translucent screen appeared before my eyes.
Guardian contract established. Guardian, Kale. Synchronization 1%. Abilities available. Dimensional storage locked. Guardian vision locked. Soul resonance locked. Devour unlocked.
Devour? That wasn't right. I remembered the strongest survivor who had found this guardian. His first ability had been Steelskin. Not Devour. Another difference. Another change. I reached into my backpack, picked up a broken branch, focused on the strange symbol. Nothing happened. Then the branch dissolved into black particles. Those particles flowed into my hand. A notification appeared.
Organic material absorbed. Synchronization increased. 起
I stared at my hand. So that's how it works? I looked around the forest. Thousands of trees. Millions of branches. Countless animals. Everything could become fuel. A slow smile appeared on my face. For the first time, I had something the future couldn't teach me. This was completely new. And if I was the only one who understood this ability, then maybe, just maybe, I had found the one thing that even another regressor wouldn't expect. I buried the crater, not because I was afraid someone would find it, because I wanted history to unfold exactly the way everyone remembered it. If people believed the first Guardian had never appeared, they would stop looking. That bought me time. Time, are you worth more than gold? The next 18 months became a routine. Wake up, train, build, invest, hide, repeat, every single day. By the end of the first month, my warehouses had become 23. By the 6th, I owned farmland across 3 different states, private wells, solar farms, medical supply companies, a freight company that nobody had ever heard of. On paper, I wasn't rich. I was invisible. Exactly the way I wanted it. Kale almost never spoke. Sometimes days passed without hearing his voice. Then, out of nowhere, he'd ask a question. "What are you doing?" "Buying fertilizer." "Why?" "Because 18 months from now, it'll be impossible to find." He nodded. Never complimented me. Never criticized me. He simply watched. One afternoon, he finally spoke again. "You've stopped thinking like a survivor." I looked up from the construction plans. "What do you mean?" "You've started thinking like someone building a civilization?" I stayed silent. He wasn't wrong. My goal had changed. In my first life, I only wanted to survive. This time, survival wasn't enough. I wanted control. Not over people. Over my own fate. Never again would I depend on anyone. Never again would I beg. Never again would I watch someone I loved decide whether I was worth sacrificing. The first time I used Devour on something valuable, it wasn't a monster. It was an old military drone. The metal dissolved into thousands of black particles. The symbol on my hand pulsed. A new message appeared.
Material analysis complete. High-density alloy recorded. Future constructions improved.
I frowned. Recorded? Kale smiled for the first time in weeks. Your ability doesn't merely consume. It learns. That single sentence changed everything. I immediately canceled 3 construction projects. Bought scrapyards instead. Factories. Old laboratories. Aircraft graveyards. Every material. Every machine. Every alloy. Every circuit. If Devour could learn from everything it absorbed, then knowledge itself could become a weapon. While the world obsessed over stock prices, I was feeding an ability no one else even knew existed. 18 months passed. The third Helios file arrived exactly on schedule. This time, nobody laughed. The governments couldn't deny it anymore. Military convoys appeared across the country. Emergency broadcasts became normal. People started stockpiling food, buying generators, emptying supermarkets. The panic had finally begun. I watched it all from the security room of Warehouse 17. 32 screens covered the wall, each one connected to a different safe house. Food, fuel, water, medicine, vehicles, seeds, everything exactly where I wanted it. Then, an alert appeared on the largest monitor. Undoan transmission detected. Not from the government, not from the military, not from the Helios network. Someone was broadcasting directly to every Guardian. The screen turned black. A single sentence appeared. Congratulations! You have survived the preparation phase? Under it, a countdown began. 00023 Manolchon 58. 24 hours. I had expected the great blackout in 3 months, not tomorrow. For the first time since returning, my memories were wrong. Kale slowly stood beside me. His expression had completely changed. Noah, this is where your first life truly begins. I looked at the countdown, then back at him. What changed? Kale didn't answer. He simply looked at the screen. Someone made their move before you. 3 months. That's all it took. 3 months for me to realize I wasn't building alone anymore. At first, the changes were so small I convinced myself they were coincidences. A plot of land I intended to buy sold the day before I arrived. A pharmaceutical company I planned to acquire received an anonymous investment overnight. An abandoned hydroelectric station was purchased by a corporation that hadn't even existed in my previous life. 1 coincidence was possible. 10 were impossible. Someone was following the exact same roadmap. I spread dozens of maps across the table and marked every location I remembered. Future relics, dimensional cracks, strategic warehouses. Green meant untouched. Red meant already taken. There were more red marks every week. Someone wasn't reacting to me. They were anticipating the future just like I was. Kale watched me work without saying a word. Finally, he spoke. You're smiling. I am. Why? Because now I know I'm not crazy. My memories aren't wrong. Someone else remembers. Kale folded his arms. Or someone is creating the future you're remembering. I looked up. What? He walked away without explaining. That night, I made my first mistake. I became predictable. Instead of choosing a different opportunity, I raced toward the next relic exactly as I had planned. When I arrived, the vault door was already open. Empty. No signs of a fight. No fingerprints. No cameras. Just one object resting on the floor. A single black chess piece. A king? Underneath it was a handwritten note. You're slower than I expected. No signature. No fingerprints. Nothing. Just that sentence. For the first time since waking up 2 years in the past, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't the hunter anymore. Someone had already started hunting me. I picked up the chess piece. It was warm, as if someone had left it only minutes earlier. Coordinates were carved into the bottom. They led to a small cafe downtown. It was a trap. I knew it. I went anyway. The cafe was almost empty. An old man read by the window. 2 students argued over a laptop. A waitress cleaned glasses. I ordered black coffee and waited. 5 minutes. 10. 20. Nothing. Just as I was about to leave, the waitress placed a folded receipt beside my cup. Someone forgot this. He said you'd understand. I unfolded it. Wrong table. Every seat was occupied except one corner booth behind a bookshelf. The chair was still warm. On the table was another receipt. Much better, Noah. No one in the cafe had said my name out loud, Not the waitress, not anyone at the counter. He'd never been close enough to hear it. He just already knew it, the same way he seemed to already know everything else. The bell above the door rang. A man wearing a gray hoodie stepped outside. Average height, average build, nothing memorable. I followed him through the crowded streets and into a subway station. The train doors closed just as I reached the platform. For the first time, he looked directly at me. He smiled with recognition, as if he had expected this meeting for years. The train pulled away. My phone vibrated. "Stop chasing me! You're already late." The message had been sent 3 minutes before I entered the cafe. When I returned to Warehouse 17, Cale was waiting. "You met him. You know who he is?" "No." "Then, how do you know?" His silence answered more than words. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I trained until Cale told me I had been distracted for 500 punches. "What would you do if someone always knew your next move?" I asked. "Why assume he's predicting you?" Cale said. "What if he's predicting himself?" Then he told me to attack. Every punch missed. Every kick found empty air. He wasn't faster. He moved early. "I'm not reacting," he said. "I'm arriving first." For the next week, I changed everything. No schedules, no routines, no repeated routes. 3 days later, Warehouse 9 reported an intrusion. Nothing had been stolen. On a workbench, 12 nuts and bolts had been arranged into a chess position. One piece missing. The Black Knight. I didn't recognize the position. I looked it up that night anyway. Some old instinct telling me it mattered. It matched a famous game from decades earlier, a move everyone at the time called a mistake, a piece sacrificed for nothing. It wasn't a mistake. It was bait, and the player who took it lost the whole match 4 moves later. Maybe every relic I had lost, every property, every message had been placed on purpose. Maybe I wasn't playing against him. I was playing the game he wanted me to play. A notification appeared.
Guardian synchronization. 5%. New passive ability unlocked. Echo perception.
I touched the square where the missing knight should have been. A vision exploded inside my mind. Warehouse 17 was burning. Blood covered the floor. The man in the gray hoodie stood among the flames, looking past me. "They're almost here again." The vision vanished. Cale appeared beside me. "What did you see?" "I don't think it was the future." Cale closed his eyes. "No, it was from another cycle." For the first time since waking up 2 years in the past, I stopped chasing ghosts. If the man in the gray hoodie wanted me to react, I would do the opposite. I closed every file related to him, deleted every investigation, burned every handwritten note. From that moment on, he no longer existed. At least, that was what I wanted him to believe. His identity wasn't important. His objective was. If he wanted relics, I'd stop fighting over relics. If he wanted strategic locations, I'd stop competing for them. Instead, I'd prepare for something no one else had considered. People. In my first life, the strongest survivors weren't always the strongest fighters or the first ones to a relic. Some of the most important people I'd ever meet were doctors, engineers, mechanics, farmers, electricians, pilots, chemists. The kind of strength nobody notices until the day everyone needs it at once. I opened a spreadsheet and filled it with hundreds of names. A nurse from Chicago, a welder in Texas, a chemistry teacher in Arizona, an amateur radio operator in Montana. I didn't recruit them. I solved problems they didn't know they had. Anonymous donations, paid medical bills, canceled foreclosures, scholarships, business investments, equipment grants. None of them knew I existed. But when the world collapsed, they would remember that someone had once saved them. Cale watched the list grow. "You've changed. You no longer think like a survivor." "No, I think like someone building a future." Cale smiled. "Good. Kingdoms aren't built with relics. They're built with people." That afternoon, a little girl arrived at Warehouse 17 asking to speak with the owner. She sat on the loading dock, maybe 8 years old, wearing a white dress and dirty sneakers, in the middle of a fenced industrial lot 40 minutes from the nearest house. Nobody at the gate remembered letting her in. When she saw me, she smiled. "You're late." She knew about the man in the gray hoodie, though I never told her his name or described him. She asked if I knew why I had been allowed to return. Allowed. Not chosen. Not sent. Allowed. Then she handed me an old family photograph. My parents, my brother, Elena, me, and one extra person behind us. A young man in a gray hoodie, smiling at the camera. I had never seen him before, yet my brother was looking directly at him. "This is fake." "You're assuming your memories are complete," she said. I realized I couldn't remember who had taken the photograph. She told me I didn't need answers. I needed allies. Then she warned me to check my security cameras, and before I could ask her a single question about who she was, or who sent her, or how she'd gotten past the gate, she was already walking away across the lot, unhurried, like a girl who knew nobody would try to stop her. By the time I looked back, she was gone. I never learned her name. I've stopped assuming that was an accident. Every recording from the previous 6 hours had been replaced. The man in the gray hoodie had walked through every level of Warehouse 17, opened every vault, examined every crate, and looked directly into every camera. Before leaving, he pointed behind the main security lens. Behind me. The video ended. Cale stood in the corner, staring at the monitor. "He found it," he whispered. "Found what?" "The one place I prayed he'd never discover." For the first time, I saw fear in Cale's eyes. I replayed the footage 23 times. The man never looked at the shelves or supplies. He watched the cameras. He wanted me to see him. He wasn't stealing. He was communicating. He still needed me alive. Important pieces aren't sacrificed early. They're manipulated, used, protected until the right moment. "If you need me," I whispered, "then I can use you too." The next morning, I bought a failing television station. Then a radio network, a satellite uplink company, a podcast host, and obscure forums. I built a communications network for the apocalypse. In my first life, people died because nobody knew what was happening. This time, information would be my greatest weapon. 3 weeks later, a chemical explosion struck an industrial district 7 months ahead of schedule. Instead of investigating, I broadcast evacuation routes, medical instructions, and shelter locations. More than 6,000 people escaped. In my first life, almost all of them died. That evening, a white envelope arrived. Inside was one word. Interesting. For the first time, I had surprised him. Far away, the man stood before a wall of maps and photographs. At the center, he moved my picture. He crossed out Cycle 218. Predictable. Underneath, he wrote Cycle 21821, variable. "Good," he said. I was getting tired of winning. 3 nights later, a bridge collapsed 6 months ahead of schedule. A surgeon named Sarah Collins was supposed to die there. In my first life, she performed more than 3,000 surgeries after the Great Blackout. Without her, one of the largest survivor settlements would have collapsed. I drove through blocked roads, ran onto the groaning bridge, shattered the window of her blue sedan, and pulled her free seconds before the roadway fell away. She stared at me, breathless. "There were 2 of you." At the opposite end of the ruined bridge stood the man in the gray hoodie. He nodded once, then vanished into the smoke. He had come to save her too. Cale later told me some people were so important that every cycle fought to keep them alive. I began studying the people I had chosen to protect. Everyone influenced someone else. Sarah saved a patient who later designed portable fusion cells. Marcus Hale trained the woman who discovered the first stable dimensional barrier. Emily Brooks taught the boy who would negotiate peace between 3 survivor cities. I had been saving consequences instead of causes. History rarely depends on heroes. It depends on who creates them. So I built a network of scholarships, grants, housing assistance, research funding, and small business investments. Thousands of tiny actions quietly rewrote lives. Then one of my predictions disappeared. An accident that should have happened simply never occurred. The future wasn't fixed. It was elastic. It resisted change until enough pressure made it snap into a new shape. 3 weeks later, Warehouse 21 reported someone asking for asylum. He said, "Tell Noah that cycle 219 has already begun." The stranger looked young, but carried the eyes of someone who had lived 100 lives. He placed a leather notebook on the table. Every page described my life. The regression, investments, warehouses, Sarah the bridge, the cafe, even private conversations with Kale. The final written page ended with our meeting. The next page was blank. "What is this?" "My memories. They're my memories." "No, they're mine. You're beginning to live my life." He said he had survived 218 cycles. The others had all died. Then every warehouse alarm sounded. A live feed appeared. The man in the gray hoodie stood inside Warehouse 17. "You're finally asking the right questions." The feed cut. Vault 3 had opened. Inside was Kale's original contract core. "He shouldn't be able to touch that," Kale whispered. I ran to the vault. Every emergency door opened for the intruder as if the system recognized him. The contract core remained untouched. A perfect circle in the dust showed where someone had stood. The doors slammed shut. His voice filled the room. He wanted to know whether I would protect the relic or the people. I had run to the vault. On the cameras, every worker stood perfectly still and turned toward the nearest lens. A sentence appeared. "Who taught you that people were resources?" Then, everyone returned to normal. Kale explained the question every Guardian Master eventually faced. "When the world begins to end, what will you save first? The power or the people?" I refused the choice. There had to be a third answer. I walked through Warehouse 17 alone and learned the workers' names. Carlos, Megan, Tyler, Luis, Hannah. They weren't resources. They were lives. I redesigned everything around evacuation routes, medical corridors, civilian shelters, and redundant communication hubs. When a transformer fire destroyed $2 million in equipment, every worker escaped in under 4 minutes. A package arrived. Inside was the missing Black Knight and a handwritten note. "You found the third answer. Power alone fails. Compassion alone fails. The future belongs to the one who can protect both." I realized the man wasn't trying to beat me. He was evaluating me. Then a photograph appeared on my phone. It showed me, Kale, and the gray-hooded man standing near the warehouse. Someone else had taken it. Someone wearing a pure white mask. 2 players have finally noticed each other. The Arbiter has now entered the board. Kale went pale when he saw the white mask. Arbiters weren't supposed to interfere. They observed, recorded, and judged. If one had entered the board, the rules had changed. Every television and phone switched on. A global emergency broadcast appeared. 72.000. Humanity has completed the preparation phase. The selection phase begins in 72 hours. I didn't remember a selection phase. Neither did Kale. The world panicked. Markets collapsed. Supermarkets emptied. Fuel vanished. Governments urged calm. Then my satellite network detected thousands of pods changing trajectory in orbit. Their destinations included cities, military bases, hospitals, schools, and Warehouse 17. At first, I thought they were coming for me. Then I mapped every impact point. They formed a symbol. Kale said he had seen fragments of it below us. During construction, we had struck Blackstone 60 feet beneath the warehouse. Drills broke. Compasses spun. Sensors failed. I had assumed it was bedrock. It wasn't. In the maintenance tunnels, a crack opened in the foundation. Darkness swallowed the flashlight beam. Golden lines spread through the black surface like veins. A voice older than language echoed from the earth. The 7th gate recognizes its keeper. Every pod changed course toward 7 locations across the planet. Warehouse 17 was one of them. The golden veins pulsed like the heartbeat of something enormous. Every display showed the same words. Keeper confirmed. Kale knelt. 7 columns of light rose from Earth into space. Warehouse 17, the Gobi Desert, Greenland, the Amazon, the Pacific, the Sahara, and Antarctica. Then every satellite lost signal. Thousands of black objects descended from the clouds. My phone received an impossible image time-stamped March 18th, 1437. The same 7 pillars of light rose from Earth. A handwritten sentence appeared beneath it. "This isn't the first apocalypse." One black object landed in the parking lot. It wasn't a pod. It was a coffin made of the same black material beneath the warehouse. Golden cracks spread across its surface. The lid began to open. The countdown had never been leading to the end of the world. It had been counting down to someone's arrival. Nobody moved. A guard asked whether we should engage. No one fires. No one goes outside. No one opens those doors. If it's hostile, those rifles won't matter. Cities began going offline. Not destroyed. Gone. Kale told me I had one chance to become the keeper. If I refused, someone else would accept. Golden threads emerged from the coffin and drifted through the warehouse, touching mechanics, nurses, guards, and children. One thread stopped inches from my heart, then turned away. It rejected me. "No," Kale said. "It recognized you." The thread moved to a 19-year-old warehouse assistant named Ethan, one of the names on my own list. A kid I'd quietly paid through trade school 8 months earlier without ever meeting him in person. Light exploded around him. The ancient voice returned. "The first candidate has been chosen." Ethan had never appeared in my memories. Not once. The future I remembered wasn't changing anymore. It was gone. 70 hours remained. For the first time, I was no longer the man who knew the future. I was simply another survivor, standing at the edge of a world that had become completely unknown. Beyond the warehouse doors, thousands of synchronized footsteps drew closer. The lights flickered once, then died. The final thing I heard was the voice beneath the warehouse. Calm, ancient, unavoidable. "Welcome to the final cycle."